Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show. Coming at you live every Wednesday on YouTube, Twitter, and on Facebook. My name is Mark Devlin, and this is Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist chat and discussion show. I'm here tonight with my co-hosts, David Griffiths and Mairi Devlin as well. How are you both tonight?
Well, I'm very well, thank you, Mark.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Mairi.
I'm well also, if a little chilly, but all good.
Yes, it is a little bit cold. It's not quite spring yet. Near Castaclutto may be out, as expression goes. Anyway, David, what were you going to be looking at tonight?
Tonight, well, I will be discussing Scotland's opposition parties, and I will be asking which ones, if any, deserve our votes right now.
Okay,
that's a good question.
Yes,
it really
is. Good. Yes, so-called opposition. You're supposed to do like opposition.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Mairi, what have you got for us this evening?
Well, I'm going to be talking about Scotland's international aid funds and the lack of transparency over how and where they are distributed.
Right, okay, and we'll all be talking about the world's eye on Scotland over the hate crime bill and J.K. Rowling's victory over Humza Yousaf.
Yes.
And of course,
we have Zoomer of the Week.
Yes, okay, so we're back with all that and much more in just a moment. See you soon. I pressed the wrong button. Oh, God, titles. Okay, there we go. Right, great. Well, welcome back to the Majority Show, Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist chat and discussion. Our aim is a better Scotland without the toxic nationalism that is strangling Scotland's potential, and I'm sure that is your aim as well if you're watching tonight here with David and Mairi. Very glad to have you with us here on the show every Wednesday. As always, a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you are watching from this evening.
Indeed. And remember, sharing is caring. The #1 thing you can do is to like the show on YouTube to increase the audience size. Even if you don't subscribe, hit a like. And if you can subscribe, please do so. All helps to increase the reach of the show at the click of one button.
Yes, we love your likes. We really do, and it really puts us up in the algorithm. So please do like it now. You can also hit the subscribe button. I don't know if that flashes. I'm going to test that after the show. We button where you subscribe. Hi, it's me, Paul. Mark. Okay. Hi, Paul. Hi, Paul. Very good. Now is a great time that you can get a Majority T-shirt. You can see this fantastic Abolish Holyrood one here. Cut out the middleman, we say, make life a lot easier for us all. But you can also get Abolish Holyrood or Majority mugs, mouse mats, hats, and some other very nice T-shirts in there. Please buy them for yourself or as gifts.
And as usual, I'll be managing the deluge of comments, so please keep them short and snappy, and I'll try to put as many up on screen as I can.
Right, okay, so where are we at? I've just realised I've loaded up the wrong thing here. Okay, so first of all, some Majority news. I was on the telly the other day. Why is it not coming up? Okay, hold on. Oh, there it comes up.
Because it's a video?
Yes, it's coming up. I was on the telly the other day on TalkTV to talk about Scotland's devolution disaster while you lot were eating your Easter eggs. So these are the things that I have to do for the cause. Go out on talk with Peter Cardwell on TalkTV. I'll play a minute of it. You can find the rest of it on our YouTube channel.
Mark, maybe I can start with you in Scotland. Why do you think devolution hasn't worked? This can't just be about the SNP, because of course Labour were in power, the Lib Dems as well, the Greens have been in power. A lot of different parties have been in power in Scotland over the last 25 years since devolution was brought in. So what is your broad view of devolution there?
Well, I think we've had 25 years of this experiment of devolution, and what has it given Scots? Do they feel closer to government or further away? And I think many Scots now feel that the administration in Edinburgh is actually more remote than the one in Westminster, because basically its priorities are not aligned with the Scottish people. We have For example, Humza Yousaf pretending to be the First Minister of Gaza instead of being the First Minister of Scotland, and dealing with issues that are entirely out of his remit. Most Scots just simply want local government to empty the bins and provide local services, and we don't really need to have this parallel government fighting with the UK government all the time, and when we want our bins emptied. Oh, okay. When we want our bins emptied, that was the thing there. Okay, so if you would like to see some more of that, there's now a few minutes of it. The other guy who was on there wasn't all that interesting, but my bits are great. So please have a look at that. Haven't been on the telly for a while, and hopefully there'll be more things there. David, do you have any comments on that? You watched it, didn't you?
I did watch it. He asked a question which I thought was a little bit... I didn't really agree with it. The premise of it, when you were talking about the fact that the Greens are leading the SNP by the nose,
yes,
although they're a tiny proportion of the elected representatives, he said, well, isn't that a failure of politics rather than devolution? Well, I don't think it is. I think it's a fundamental breakdown in the idea of devolved power. The idea of devolved power is that it goes to the elected regional government, not a bunch of cranks with zero mandate who only got in because of clear gaming of the system, to be honest with you, and in so doing are allowed to inflict their grotesque ideas on the electorate, which is what's happened. And that's clearly a failure of the devolved administrative process. That's not politics. Politics would be if one group chose to vote with another group to stick it to a third group, that's politics, not this. That's a fundamental breakdown to me, anyway.
Yeah, I think almost you feel to some extent that the way they've designed this government or parliament is possibly the worst of all worlds.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't put a proper electoral system in just for a start, where the majority, right, the majority of Scots would have the say in what we have as a minority of the voters have the power over this parliament, and then that minority is run by another minority. And it's really put me off the idea of proportional representation. I've been going on about that on Twitter for some time, basically as an avenue for extremism. But that's for another day, I think.
One quick question, if I can here, because it's great to get answer a question early on. Jim Slater says, how do we ungame the system? Great question. I think the way we do it, Jim, is to a great extent to adopt the tactics and use the capability of the electoral system for our benefit rather than constantly be the victims of it. That's how I think we do it. And I think we can't do it for the general election. The general election is straight down the line, first past the post, that's it. But in Holyrood, you do have the opportunity to, if you like, fight fire with fire. We shouldn't be the ones, the victims of two parties who are working closely in tandem effectively to get more representation. We've got to do something similar, and this is what All for Unity came up with, and that's what Alba copied last time as well. That's what we've got to look at.
Yeah, but we shouldn't really be, I mean, okay, I know we shouldn't really be in an electoral system where that kind of thing can happen. That's the thing, where gaming the system is the norm. That's not really right by any sense. And I would rather have first past the post, all first past the post, even if it meant that everyone was a SNP, because then you could vote them out. But the moment you've got this half mushy system where even if they lose, they still get votes. It's nonsense.
Yeah,
really is.
Where you have the Greens get no votes, and they're deciding policy in Scotland.
Exactly. A possibility is having a referendum, because there was a UK referendum on proportional representation. The idea was refused. There's never been a Scottish referendum on proportional representation, and it's not quite PR, the second vote, but it's close. So
but just again, that really is the worst of both worlds. Well, we talked. Unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to talk about those on the TalkTV thing, and I was hoping to take a final word in, saying that we need real reform, but unfortunately, it was cut off before then. But nonetheless, right, okay. Moving on to the news of the day. Or the week. The hate crime monster is amongst us all right now. He was let loose on April the 1st, April Fool's Day. And you please watch what you say in these comments that are coming in here, or else the monster will be after you. Anyway, it's been reported, though, that in the first day, 3,800 hate crime reports were recorded. of which 1,800 have been processed. That compares with 5,000 or so in the entire previous year, which means one of three things. There's a lot of hate in Scotland. There are a lot of snitches in Scotland, or there are neither of those, and this is a terrible law, and people are doing a temporary protest. As I said last week, this is a win-win for them, I think, because whatever way it goes, it increases government power. If you try to flood the system, the government will use these figures to show that hate is out of control in Scotland. And it's not out of control. That's the thing. It never was out of control in Scotland, as Mairi pointed out a few weeks ago. Hate crimes against transgender people. And let's tell the truth here. This is what a lot of what's driving this. I've seen so many posts of people saying, "Oh, it's hate against transgender people that is the reason we need this legislation." Well, there were only 55 hate crimes against transgender people in 2022 to 23, and that's out of a population of 24,000, which I worked out using a calculator. It means that less than 1 in 436 transgender people recorded a hate incident against them. So while those are that's still an issue nonetheless. Of course, we want to get those to a minimum. It's simply a moral panic whipped up by cynical politicians to enforce government restrictions, and the rest of us who are not hateful and not law-abiding and not snitches normally. So basically, it all just suits them having this culture of people snitching each other, even if it's a laugh. It's not really a laugh, is it? I mean, what people in East Germany were like, oh yes, this is making jokes about their administration in Russia and so on, about the oppression, but they were still oppressed, weren't they?
Well, this is going to ruin people's lives. I mean, if you get accused of one of these hate crimes because of something you've said, then you might be at the point where you have to hire a lawyer and you have to take time off work, and then work finds out what you've been up to, and you get fired because you've committed some kind of hate crime. Even if you're found innocent in the end, it can take up months and months of stress in your life.
Of course, the punishment is the process. Now, apparently most of the hate crime reports were for Humza Yousaf and his infamous white speech. So let's have a look at that again. Please excuse the hate, but here it comes.
White. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
I mean, he's trying to make a point there, I guess, but very inexpertly, perhaps. You reminded, David, that Elon Musk, taking a wee break from launching rockets to Mars, said that it was racist. Was he wrong, David? Does that offend you?
Well, I mean, who am I to take issue with the great Elon Musk if that's what the man said? Clearly, in his view, it is. And that means it's a crime, or at least an incident in Scotland these days. So if you come to Scotland, Elon, just please register it. That would be a big help if you did. Did it offend me? Well, it shocked me. The speech itself at the time shocked me. I mean, to my inexpert view, I would have thought making any comment about the colour of someone's skin in relation to the job he or she is doing would be textbook racism. I would have thought, but that's just me. But I just wonder, and somebody put this up on Twitter the other day, I think it was Effie or somebody like that, I don't remember. Anyway, what would the reaction be from Police Scotland if, let's say Douglas Ross stood up in Holyrood and said, I'm a bit worried about the number of brown people in jobs. Prime Minister of the UK, brown. First Minister of Scotland, brown. Lord Mayor of London, brown. First Minister of Wales, brown. What would be the reaction to that, do we think, guys? From someone not of colour. What do we think?
Oh, we'd be shouted down as being a racist. I mean,
It'd never work again.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, it's terrible. You don't just be recorded for a hate crime incident. You'd be sent to a hate crime jail, and you would never get out again. You'd be bitten by the hate crime monster every day on the backside, whatever. Anyway, that, but I don't know where that image came into my head. But anyway, it's just so selective as well. It's he talks about those things. He doesn't talk about all the non-white people in
No.
sports, for example,
No.
or in other areas, or entertainment, who are at the top of entertainment field. And I don't need to name them. I mean, we all know who they are. Many people of different nationalities, different colours, and so on, right? But I think that perhaps the worst part about it is that he's the leader.
Yeah.
What kind of discrimination did he get to become so he couldn't become the leader? I mean, was he stopped somehow becoming the leader? Did Nicola Sturgeon ever turn around to him and say, "No, you can't become the leader because you're from, you've got Asian heritage"? I mean, I don't think so. I don't doubt very much that's ever been said to him in his entire life.
I'm sure
right?
you're right.
And so, I mean, you can talk about generalized racism, like people. There is some, of course, there is some racism, but how did it specifically affect him? I don't think there was that very much. And of course, as Craig and others have mentioned, the tone of it, the way he spits out the word white, as if it's some kind of FU. And you're like, well, this is a country that's 98% white. Anyway, so why are you complaining? If we went to Pakistan or we went to any country that wasn't, was like 100% full of Pakistanis, for example, and we had that kind of speech, we wouldn't be allowed to have that kind of speech. There'd be a mob outside paying for your blood.
I think you're absolutely right.
In those type of parliaments, anyway. But I mean, ultimately, I think, it's an offensive speech, right?
Yeah.
I think we can say it's offensive, but is it criminal? Is it worth reporting to the police? I don't think so. I mean, free speech is free speech for your enemies as well, right? That's the point of it. You're supposed to say, right, you say that, it shows that you're an idiot. And, we'll talk about it and so on, and we'll try and counter it and so on. But using we're not going to use the force of the government to try and make you not say it again.
No.
I mean, what do you think of that? The free speech principle, is it getting lost in all this talk of hate crime reporting and so on, David?
Well, I think for certain it can't really compute that you've got a protection of free speech, but at the same time, you can't say anything that, if it's perceived by one person to be hurtful, means that you are subject to either prosecution or being logged in a database for a hate crime. That's not free speech. That's the absolute antithesis of free speech. It's anything but. It's restricted speech, and it's forced to conform speech. So that you can't have. Yes, this protects free speech, but make sure you don't say anything that might offend anybody. They are completely mutually exclusive. So yes, if you're going to continue with this, if this legislation is to remain in the statute bill, there is no free speech in Scotland. Absolutely not. Particularly when they've framed the legislation in such a way that it is up to, firstly, the perception of somebody listening to decide whether they're offended or not, and secondly, to some beat Bobby, apparently, to say, okay, is this hate? Is this stirring up hate? Right, okay, we're going to have to do something here. So,
I suppose there is another issue in there, which is the actual colossal waste of police time.
Yeah.
I mean, having to filter through thousands of these hate crime incidents, and how are they doing? How many people have they got assigned to that? Maybe there's a freedom of information.
I was quite shocked that you said that 1,800 had already been processed. This is only the 3rd of April.
I know. I mean, how can they assess
how many people are actually working on that?
Well, I think the answer to that is, how many of these are about Humza? 1,700, right? That's a no to all of them. That's it. That's how they've been processed, rather than being looked at individually, which is what they said they would do.
Right. Well,
I mean, that's just tit for tat, isn't it? It's like, well, your side said this, so we're going to report someone in your side.
Some people think that gum up the system, but all it does is make the government hire more people to try and police us more.
Yeah,
really.
There's a big shortage of police. The police are really complaining about the levels of the numbers of people they have and the level of policing that's going on. Crimes are not being investigated.
I'm sure they're going to have plenty of citizens who would volunteer to do that work, like Winston Smith, for example, or some such person. I don't know if Winston was actually a volunteer or was forced to stuff his things down the memory hole. But anyway, talking of ministers who can't do anything right, Siobhan Brown, who is the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, and gets £110,000 of your money a year for that. Was on telly twice, actually, saying that you shouldn't worry about this law because there's a high barrier to criminality. And she basically said that it was because that you'd only record a hate crime when someone is threatening and abusive, she said. Now, what it would be to be a crime is to be threatening and abusive with the intent to stir up hatred towards an individual, and that this would cause this individual to have fear or alarm. Now, that is a very, very high threshold for criminality. Excuse me. But, in fact, it's not. The law doesn't say that at all. It says not threatening and abusive. It says threatening or abusive.
That's correct.
Okay, and also it doesn't say that causing an individual to fear or alarm is part of the law, but it says that it basically says that if the person is offended, right? So, David, we've got these ministers, highly paid, in fact, ministers. And apparently, she's from your neck of the woods and down in Ayrshire.
She is.
But we're not blaming all people from Ayrshire.
That's a hate crime, Mairi.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, indeed. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't last long.
So, I mean, why? If they don't know how the law works, what's the hope for the rest of us?
Well, yeah, indeed. Siobhan Brown did indeed take the Ayr constituency in Holyrood from the incumbent Conservative MSP, winning it by, I think, 180 odd votes. So that's
180.
I think it was something like that. It was a ridiculously low number. Yeah,
Right, okay.
Crazy. Anyway, so she got in. But this is Siobhan has been put out to talk up the second now item of laugh a minute legislation from the SNP. First was XL bullies when Peter Smith talked to her about it and said, so how many of these dogs are in Scotland? Oh, we don't know. All right, do you know how to identify them? Not really, no. And do you think they're dangerous? No, not as a breed. It's just deed rather than breed. Right, so why on earth are you banning them then if you don't know anything about them? And she went, I didn't have a clue what to say to that. And it's much the same yesterday morning when she was on Good Morning Scotland. She was asked about this and she didn't have a clue, obviously, what would constitute a crime. And they tried to say to her, well, for example, will J.K. Rowling's speech about trans women being men, or would that be, for example, a hate crime, or would it be a non-crime hate incident? Well, I'm not really sure. She hasn't got a clue. Could not even begin to define it. Couldn't contextualise any of the likely outcomes. So she's now, for the second time, trying to defend a bill that she clearly hasn't even digested. So, and in terms of like I'll talk about this later, but the non-crime hate incidents, I mean, that I know we're going to come on to talk about it shortly in terms of who's likely to be subject to that and who isn't. But it's looking very much like, hang on, what would it be like if we investigated or stored Humza's name in a non-crime hate incident? No, we better not do that. So it just strikes me that they're making decisions not based on any kind of strength of the legislation. It's more just like, what do you think? Okay, leave that one. That's, I think, as deep as it goes, really. And it's certainly
that's the definite impression I get. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a wee break and then we'll come back and talk about that in the context of the wizarding world of J.K. Rowling. So give us a second and we'll see you in a moment. Okay, is it Rowling or Rowling? I don't know.
Rowling, I don't know.
I don't know.
JK,
Whichever, the Harry
Rowling.
Potter author came out swinging against Humza's hate crime bill this week. Will she succeed in finding all of Humza's Horcruxes and turn him into a quivering dead baby Voldemort? On April Fool's Day. Actually, I looked up this dead baby Voldemort, from the final film. Spoiler alert. And it's all got sensitive warnings on all the images. Not allowed to. Maybe it's for the kids or something like that. Kind of weird. Anyway, on April Fool's Day, to extend a metaphor, she whipped out her wand and took aim at men who don't want wands. In a series of tweets, she praised transgender men encroaching on women's spaces as women, only to end with April Fools. They're all men. That was, as the police say, a serious case of misgendering. Not only that, she taunted the police to arrest her. Looking forward to being arrested. #arrest me. And said that she will support any woman who gets targeted for calling a man a man. Okay, so a lot of drama there, of course. Transgender activists were complaining about it a lot. India Willoughby, for example, and many others saying that she was committing a crime in Scotland. But yesterday, the police said her tweets were not criminal. And just before the show aired, they also said that her tweets were not going to be recorded as non-hate crime incidents. That's and they also said that Humza's white speech would not be logged as a non-crime incident as well. So, David, any thoughts on how this is playing out? Is it one rule for the well-connected and the rich, and the rest of us stuck in limbo like Harry Potter and Dumbledore at the end of that movie?
Exactly. It looks very, very much like the people with the very large Twitter accounts won't be subjected to any sort of censure, certainly not prosecution. And the point that Rowling was making when she said she'll support any woman who gets targeted for calling a man, she actually said she would retweet whatever they've said. So thereby they're in challenging the police, saying, you're going to arrest her, you better arrest me as well, knowing that they won't do that. So where the police will really come unstuck is if they arrest Jeannie McGrory, who says something, but they don't arrest J.K. Rowling.
Not Jeannie. She's terrible.
She's terrible, Jeannie, honestly. So it's just that it looks like the high profile will escape anything. Apart from, it seems, Murdo Fraser. Maybe you're not high profile enough, Murdo, old chap.
Yes.
Because maybe they think, well, he can't even beat John Swinney in a constituency vote, so yeah, we might nobody cares.
Right. Well, this is the point, actually, to some extent. What is the determining factor?
Right.
Is, if you have 10 billion in the bank, then you're fine.
Yep.
But if you are, as you said, wee Genie, then you'll get fined. But where's the line? And we said last week, they're going to choose the most insipid cases as well, the ones that can be argued to death about, so that they can make a point to people as well. Yep. Murdo is. People perhaps will get clarification. And why is the police clarifying now?
Exactly. Yeah, indeed. Because this happened last year, and they only just told him it had happened. And now, when he's challenged it, nobody said to him, "Okay, we'll take you off. Sorry about that."
That's right. They didn't do that, right?
Indeed.
As well.
But the next two cases, which are almost identical, really. They're saying, oh, no, that's not going to be a hate crime. No, and it's not a non-crime hate incident either. Well, what is it then in that case? And who decides? Is it the guy who takes the call who decides, the copper? What if his colleague disagrees? What did he do then? Did he do paper, rock, scissors or something? What do you do? How do you cope with this? It just seems like the typical SNP nonsense. It's the same when this, as we always say, the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act came out, and they said that the way to avoid prosecution is not to sing any sectarian or offensive songs. Great. In that case, can you tell us what isn't a sectarian or an offensive song? No, we can't. Well, how do you judge it then? It's up to the arresting officer and the context. And they actually said at the time,
so there wasn't a list of songs and stuff like that. At least that would be straightforward.
Absolutely. They refused point blank to do that. And they actually said, oh, no, well, there are cases when certain songs, even if they're not particularly offensive, can cause offence. And people said, so are you including the national anthem, the God Save the Queen? Yes, that potentially could be. The national anthem could be offensive. What? Seriously, try passing that legislation in America, guys. Good luck, or any country. Wow. So that's what it was like. And this is just yet more farcically bad SNP legislation. This is the worst yet, though, by far. I think
this is. You got people. The gender thing was bad enough. At least targeted to women. Yeah. Certainly from the activist perspective, and this one targets everyone.
Yeah,
right. That's the thing. Now, J.K. Rowling announced. She said, as you said there, if they go after any woman for simply calling a man, I'll repeat that woman's words, and they can charge us both at once. Which makes me think that she should actually stir up. She should do that about every topic, right?
Good idea.
And then she should stir up hatred amongst all groups. And if she doesn't get prosecuted, then surely we're all safe. Perhaps not. Anyway, the issue here isn't so much it's not so much that J.K. Rowling is right or wrong. The issue is that she shouldn't be compelled to call someone something that she doesn't think is that thing.
Quite.
That's the issue. And
free speech, exactly that. It's impinging on her free speech rights. You must not say that this born male with fully formed genitalia is a man because he's not, because he says he's not. Okay, well, that's that, if not free speech. If you can't even say that, really, come on. But
also, it doesn't mean you don't have to do it. This is the other thing. It means that the other side means you don't have to call a transgender person a man. You can call them she if you want to. Right, that's the thing. So it's not about so much of the it's not about I mean, both sides. So let's put it that way in the argument, but they're trying to stifle the entire argument.
Quite.
That's perhaps the best way to put it. Generally, I mean, you can be polite. Of course, people want to be polite to trans people and use the preferred pronouns if that's a big thing to them. But it only goes so far. You don't have to. You shouldn't be compelled by the government to participate in that if you don't want to. Next up. Are the SNP? Did the SNP shoot himself in the foot with this new bill? Now, Ian Smart, who is a lawyer in Glasgow, written a blog that claims that the hate crime law outlaws Scottish nationalism. He notes that under the law, a person commits an offence if in doing so the person intends to stir up hatred against a group of persons based on the group being defined by reference to nationality. Oh, wait a minute. Ears pricking up. Here, a reasonable and the law continues, a reasonable person would consider the behaviour or the communication of the material to be likely to result in hatred being stirred up against such a group. So he says, the next time you hear reference to the English stealing our oil, water or wind, feel free to report it to the police. It's difficult to see that this is not accidentally a crime. And he notes that in the cases of whether the speech is threatening or abusive, there is an exception for freedom of expression. But if you're just merely insulting, there isn't actually that exemption. So basically, if they're insulting the English as a class, then they're stirring up hatred against the English, and therefore they are a hate organisation. Are they a hate party, David? What do you think?
As far as I'm concerned, absolutely, because you see, by this new definition, I would say the SNP, or certainly SNP commentators and voters, stir up hatred against countless groups. We had Nicola Sturgeon saying that she detests Tories. So what's that? If that's hardly amicable speech, is it? It's hardly respectful.
Well, it's taking a class of people and saying that you detest them when people in there are just ordinary people going about their business.
Exactly right. Exactly.
That's exactly the definition of, well, that's how racism works as well. It's like all these people are one class and we're going to define them according to one thing. And I hate all those people because of that.
Exactly.
I mean, it's exactly the same mechanism.
That's it. So that is doing nothing but stirring up hatred, or certainly stirring up dislike, without question. And there are certainly a lot of other groups that they do this with. The Orange Order, for one, they absolutely detest the Orange Order. We know that. Tories, Unions, Rangers Football Club, even Labour these days, we see when they're terrified of Labour more than anything else.
Of course.
They certainly stir up dislike and criticism of Israel as an entity, without any shadow of doubt. I'm not going to go down that, is that anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic? It's Israel. They are bitterly opposed to Israel as an entity. There is no question of that. So judge it any way you like, but they absolutely are. Does that make them a party of hate? Well, I guess that's up to any police constable who takes the call to decide. What a farce, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Well, it really is a farce. It's a farce becomes a tragedy or something like that, or one of these type of things. We'll have to see a little bit more how this plays out. We're already seeing rollback from the police who are saying they're not going to, as we mentioned, not going to register these non-crime hate incidents against JK and Humza Yousaf. But what we want them to say is we're not going to register against anyone. Why are they not registering non-crimes against anyone?
Yeah, quite.
You know, it's ridiculous. And what happens if this bill collapses, David? Have you thought of that?
Well, I wonder. I mean, certainly the offensive behaviour at football that went on the bill, and it was presented as a bill, and then it was subsequently defeated. And I think that all that's happened then is that it didn't really go away. As an entity, it went away, but it's bubbled under, and they've now repackaged it, really. The Named Persons Act, I don't know where we are with that, because that was defeated, as I understand it, as I remember it. But they said, no, we still plan to bring this. And how the hell can you do that? So I have to say, I'm not really sure what happens to bills when they're either rejected, taken off the statute bill, or part because they've lost the vote. Not all that sure. That's something, if anyone knows, please give me an indication. I can look it up, but I don't actually know. Sorry.
Well, I guess I was really meaning electorally, but I think we all know it's
Or
going to work
electorally,
electorally anyway.
if it gets defeated electorally, well, let's say Labour wins 27 seats in Scotland and the SNP wins 19 and Tories and the others win whatever the remainder is, 13 between them. What does that mean? It means that the Sarwar should come out and say, okay, we've seen a whole load, not Sarwar, Starmer should come out and say, we've seen a whole load of very low quality legislation in Scotland, and we'll be working with our colleagues in Holyrood to review whether these are still applicable given the thorough rejection of the SNP in the election. That's what I would do, because you cannot have a party who's brought in all this legislation being thoroughly rejected at the ballot box and still say, okay, well,
I think that's a good. Actually, I do think that's a good point. I do think it's been rejected. Your plans were rejected, and they're rejected because of these bad laws. So we'll get rid of these bad laws. Also, you're not going to take these bad laws and put them in the rest of the UK because you've already shown how awful they are. So perhaps in that sense, as a petri dish, full of viruses that shouldn't be let out in the general population, that has had some purpose. Right. Thanks for that. Thank you for joining the show and being with us tonight. It takes a lot of work to organise the show on our social media and do all that type of stuff. So if you can, please donate to the show. We have the support of many wonderful donors so far, but an extra one or two is always great. So if you are feeling that you'd like us to continue with work, then please do make a one-time or monthly donation.
Well, anything small or large is most appreciated. So please go to our website and click the button on the right side of the page, or leave a super thanks or a super sticker on YouTube.
Right. Thank you all for your support. Next up, Dave is going to be talking about Scotland's opposition parties. Oh, we did that bit. And who we should vote for. So we'll see you in a few seconds.
Well, everyone, as you regular viewers and listeners will know, my main focus these days is in the encouragement of tactical pro-UK voting at the next general election. I think that's absolutely essential for squeezing out as many votes as we can and ensuring we get the maximum turnout and the most effective use of Scotland's anti-nationalist majority in electoral terms. So, these days, it's not always an easy sell. It's becoming quite difficult as we get closer to election day, because every day on social media, and I've mentioned this, I think, in the past, I find myself holding the same conversations with people, and I totally understand where they're coming from. And these are anti-nationalist people who are saying to me, look, hang on a minute, why would I vote Labour or Lib Dem? For a start, they can't even say what a woman is, and they voted for the hate crimes bill. Why on earth would I vote for them? I'm not going to. I said, yeah, okay, I understand, but blah, 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 and I make the explanation for why we should do what we've got to do. But there are others who say, okay, well, why would I vote Conservative? This isn't a Conservative party at all. I am Conservative, but these guys are social liberals and they can't stop refugees coming in and blah, blah, blah. I totally get that point. And yet more people say, well, I'm going to vote for Reform. Right, okay, so it's all getting a little bit messy. And I just think what we need to do is, if you like, refocus. So let me just say my view, okay? In Holyrood especially, Scotland's opposition parties are pretty dreadful. They don't really act like parties of opposition in the main. To be honest with you, that in Holyrood, the parties that behave most like parties of opposition are the SNP and the Greens, because they're always complaining about the Westminster Conservative government.
Yes, that's a good point.
It's true, isn't it? They complain about government policy. They certainly complain about UK foreign policy, and without question, they complain about UK domestic policy. They comment on reserved issues all the time. And meanwhile, they're supposed to be the party of devolved government in Scotland, looking after their own brief, which they completely failed to do. And meanwhile, in Holyrood, Labour and the Lib Dems also see the Conservative Westminster government as the opposition rather than the SNP administration. So you get, for example, Anna Sarwar, who will talk at least as much about Conservative Westminster policy as he does about SNP Holyrood policy, and he will certainly far more readily back SNP Holyrood policy, as we've seen, than he would back anything that is Conservative. This is because, as we know, the Labour Party in Scotland is terrified of being seen to be in any measure pro or with the Conservative Party. But this is just a clear failure to do their jobs. So, and it plays straight into the hands of the SNP, who appear as the party of perpetual opposition when they're actually in government. And it just goes on and on and on. And it leads to this mess where you've got The SNP, bizarrely, would rather have a Conservative government than a Labour government in Westminster, and the Conservative government would rather have an SNP administration in Holyrood than a Labour administration. And so it's just bonkers. Have you noticed this, Mark? I'm sure you have.
Yes, well, of course. The trend I've noticed is desperation on their part. They were desperate to hold on to that last poll. Did you see that one last week? They said they were going to get 41 seats. And, and they're posting it like, oh, yeah, this is great. We're going to win. I mean, how can they possibly think they're going to win with all this going on? I mean, since we've had a year of bad headlines since Nicola Sturgeon resigned. And before that, there was a year of bad headlines, 2 years of constant bad headlines. The electorate has got the message.
Yes.
The SNP are rubbish and they cannot achieve their goal. So, I mean, this is the thing now, and they're doing this ridiculous situation where they're trying to say, okay, Labour is going to win, so your vote doesn't. You don't need to vote for. Don't need to vote for them in Scotland.
Yep.
You're like, come on, be serious.
Yep.
I mean, it's tricking the population for fools, and I think people see that. They don't like to be either taken advantage. Look what happened to Labour, right? When it became apparent that they just thought the Scots were taken for granted, right? They lost everything to the SNP, and the SNP are pretty much in a very, very similar position now. They're taking the populace for granted.
Yes, indeed they are. And so while there are some misgivings about pro-UK parties among Scotland's anti-nationalist voters, which I totally understand, where does this leave us with a Westminster general election looming now? Is going to be 6 or 7 months. It's getting closer all the time. So who should we vote? Who deserves our votes? Okay, my belief, guys, and this is simply my belief, this is a crucial general election because, as Mark's just outlined, for the first time, Scottish voters have this golden opportunity to end the SNP's recent domination of Scotland's Westminster constituency seats, which is the situation which has all come about from the, if you like, the Labour Party's failure to take seriously the wishes of the Scottish electorate. They started taking them for granted. They started assuming, of course, we can rely on 40 seats in Scotland. No, you can't, guys. You absolutely can't any longer, as the last 4 elections have shown very clearly. We know also, similarly, we know that Scotland's MSPs particularly are not of particularly high quality. They're not. We know that. The MPs in Westminster, certainly the Conservative MPs, seem fairly competent, the Scottish ones, that is. Most of the SNP drones down there just are laughably bad. Joe Cherry's clearly got a brain. Blackford, I guess, has been fairly successful in his career, but the rest of them are just a bunch of absolute clowns. So we know that we haven't, but it's even worse in Holyrood, of course. Now, the parties in Scotland, in Holyrood, that is the opposition parties, make baffling decisions. We know that they don't see what they mean all the time. You've got the SNP saying, this is a big fight, us and the Tories, when they really mean Labour, and the Labour saying, we must oppose the Tories, when they really mean, please help us get rid of the SNP. So it's very annoying. But it's not only Holyrood opposition parties who let themselves and voters down. Scotland's anti-nationalist journalists and commentators are always making an action.
Very true.
It's true. We talk about it all the time. You don't get any satirical comedy laughing at the SNP, for example. If you do, a couple of people.
Very little. Oh, it's growing now, though, I suppose.
Up to now, exactly, because they've lost their iron grip. So, and these people seem terrified of the SNP. I mean, we know what happened to Stephen Daisley when he was on STV as the political reporter or whatever. They got him out. And let's not forget, Daisley, he's supposedly the champion of anti-nationalism. But even in 2021, he acted just like a hysterical cheerleader for the Conservative Party. He actually, in one in The Spectator, he would prefer 129 Humza Yousafs in Holyrood to one George Galloway.
Yes, I'm conflicted about Daisley because, in one hand, he's quite a good writer, and he's getting closer to this idea but he's still not brave enough to come out and say Holyrood should be abolished.
No, he's not. You're right. You're right.
And we need to get to that stage because he's still too close to the system. I think that's what happens.
It's true. I mean, I was told at the last election he was getting instructions every morning in a WhatsApp group as to what to say.
It wouldn't surprise me. Just too close to the Tory party in that case. But it still doesn't sit. The issue here is, I mean, you said earlier that you should give your vote to the people who deserve it. Yeah. I don't think any of them really deserve it, but I think we've got a job to do. This is a different matter. We can assert our will on the system. right, to get the result we want.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that
deserve the vote.
any person we vote for deserves it. No, nobody deserves it. I don't even think that even anyone should deserve your vote, really. You give them a vote, and then you see. That's why I think there should be more recalls and stuff like that. You give them a test, and then if they're rubbish, you can get rid of them pretty fast.
I think that's an exceptionally good point. What I would say is we're now being told, oh, you should ask all these candidates when they come to your doorstep, Westminster candidates, that is, why did your party vote for the hate crimes bill? And if I were the candidates, I'd say I have no idea. I certainly wouldn't have voted for it. I'm standing for Westminster there in Holyrood. So, if you want to judge them and why they voted, wait 2 years and judge them when they're standing again for election there, which is how I would deal with it. And I know it's a little bit glib, but that's what I would say. I mean, what else can they say? Seriously, how do you defend that? But what I would say is, at the next Holyrood election, I think that genuinely is the time to say to Anna Sarwar, Jackie Bailey, and Lee Blaine, what in the name of God were you thinking? Seriously, what were you thinking? And at the next election, I'll be leading calls for some of these people to be tapped straight out. But remember, when it does come to the next Holyrood election, which is in 2 years next month, we should be 18 months into a Labour Westminster administration. Who knows how they'll have fared in that time? Who knows what actions they'll have taken?
Well, of course, SNP will be trying to say, look, it doesn't matter whether it's Labour or the Tories. They don't treat Scotland right and all this type of nonsense. So that is something that I think Labour has to really get a grip on early on and say we need to neutralise this threat, not by just branch office nonsense, but basically by limiting the powers of the devolved administration, because they're always going to get it. There's always going to be this parallel government running there, and they might go, all right, well, we're going to change to Labour after a while and then everything will be fine. But it's not always going to be like that. That's not the way it works. It'd be better to lance the boil.
Indeed. It's got this boil that certainly needs land. So, so my only advice, guys, and as I've always said, I'll never tell anybody how to vote. Just remember, there is a tactical voting guide for people, none of whom voted for any of these crazy bills, apart from one Conservative, bizarrely, who voted for the GRR bill. But I honestly believe the coming general election is not the time to take punitive action against these parties who have got the capability to get the SNP out, particularly Labour. Save your armour, keep your powder dry for the Holyrood election if you really want to show Labour that you're not impressed with them. But let's have this.
I don't know about that. I think we always have to, what our aim is. Certainly I think the aim overriding is to get rid of nationalism, then we can deal with two-party politics after that.
I agree. But it's possible. Who knows? As I say, we'll worry about the Holyrood election in 2 years' time. Right now, tactical voting is a way to get the SNP out. You can only win one election at a time. You can only win one back.
And one thing they have to do is shorten the time back to 4 years. 5 years between Holyrood elections is ridiculous. So we should actually draw up a list of things that Labour could implement that would be fairly easy, and what kind of pressure they could put on. That's probably quite a good idea. Thanks for that, David. Very good. Mary's going to do a short segment now on international aid. So we'll be back in a second with that. Right, Mairi, you're up.
Yeah, so recently, and we've talked about it on the show, but a lot of people have been asking how Humza Yousaf was able to spend £750,000 of Scottish taxpayers' money. He sent it to Gaza, and why Scottish taxpayers are giving money to Gaza in the first place or to other countries when people are in desperate need of financial help here at home. Anyway, a cross-party group of MSPs has launched an investigation into the Scottish Government's international aid funds, saying, guess what they found, guys? There is a lack of transparency. I mean, who would have
transparency? It's like a brick wall.
Yeah, I know. So this cross-party group, they've got concerns that has been raised from organisations about how funds are allocated and why, which is the questions we're all wanting answered.
Yes, indeed.
Now, they're supposed to be, the government every year is supposed to publish a regular report on the contributions to international development, but it hasn't been published since 2019.
It's no surprise either, is it?
Yeah,
really?
now, so this is 2024, so it's like 5 years later. They have said that they are going to publish something next week, which is for 21 to 23, but I don't know why they have to publish like 3 years all at once or why it was ever left for 4 years. It's ridiculous. Anyway, now, the Scottish Government does have a number of funding streams, including development programs for Malawi, Rwanda, and Zambia. And it also has a climate justice fund and a humanitarian emergency fund.
Okay.
But so the group that's investigating it was Labour's Sarah Boyack. She said, for too long there has not been transparency in how the Scottish Government's aid programmes have been delivered. But here's what she also said. She said, our aim will always be to ensure Scotland is world leading
for God's
in
sake.
international aid. The old world leading.
I hate all that world-leading nonsense.
Why on earth would Scotland be world leading in international aid?
It's just a Scottish exceptionalism. We're so much better. We're so much moral. We're much better people than those English people down there, or even anyone else in the world. That we are world leading in doing whatever it is. And we're world leading in bike lanes. That's what it is. Bike lanes, but people are not on. Nonsense.
We're a tiny country, right? And I mean, how much money do we actually?
Well, the thing is, I said before, that to become world leading is expensive. It's really hard to be world leading. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy and a lot of money. And Scotland doesn't have any of that, really. I mean, it's a miracle that we have some people who are actually world level in Scotland. And I'm talking in business and in sports and so on. But it takes so much effort and energy to do that. And there, of course, that's individual efforts. But our government can certainly not be considered as world leading. World leading in
so this is the person who's actually doing the investigation. So it really worries me. But the reason that this is particularly pertinent, as I said earlier, is because Humza Yousaf, he gave an extra £250,000 to Gaza despite official advice.
Yeah.
Now, he was advised to give 100,000 to 250,000 to UNICEF.
Yes.
For humanitarian water aid. And at that point, he'd already sent £500,000. But he chose to send the 250,000 to UNRWA, or however you say that. And then, of course, his in-laws were given safe passage out of Gaza the very next day. But that's just a coincidence. But apparently, Scotland doesn't have actual devolved international aid. We do have emergency relief fund, but he'd already used up the £500,000 on that. And we have a separate international development fund, which funds long-running projects. So basically what he did is he took the money from there, the 250,000.
Right.
So poor Malawi, Rwanda and Zambia, they basically got their funding cut, even though the charities and different organizations over there had already been promised the money. So he basically plundered the money that they were supposed to get and that the charities had been promised, and that was the £250,000 extra that he sent to his mates in Gaza.
The whole Gaza thing is really ridiculous. It really is shocking.
But I guess they're getting away with this because there is no scrutiny on any of this. I mean, why was he even able to send an extra £250,000?
Quite.
Well, it's not his money. That's the thing.
He's treating it like it's his money, and he can decide where it goes.
It's not a personal piggy bank.
So this is something that really has to be tightened up.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, I get to the end of the show now, and I'm like, okay, Mairi, come on, cheer us up. Okay, anyway.
Well, wait for my Zoomer.
Oh, yes, all right. Very good, Mairi. Yes, we can. The money is all over the place, and we need to. I think that's one of the actual things that Labour should do if they come in and say,
we'll add that to the list.
Annual reports, and you need to be up doing a committee at every point. And someone here, Rita, says, "Where is Jack or Sunak? You're missing in action."
Quite.
That's what it is. They're doing nothing. And the whole thing, I mean, come on, 80-seat majority, and they can't do anything. They could have done anything. Could have amended the Scotland Act. Could have done any kind of things, but they just choose not to, really not to, and it's a disaster all round. Okay, things you can do to support the show. You can make a donation to the Majorities 2024 crowdfunder. That would be great. Or you can buy a T-shirt or a mug with beautiful Abolish Holiday things. And the mug's actually going very well. Quite a few of them are going out already. Please do get one and impress your friends. And delight your enemies. No, it's not delight your enemies. Make your enemies grumpy. Okay. Okay, and you can also subscribe to the show. Hit the subscribe button. See if when I say that, if it glistens. You can also tell your friends about us, and you can also do all of the above, which makes us feel really appreciated. Underlined exclamation mark. Coming up, it's the moment you have been waiting for, the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
That time again, isn't it? There was a lady once who thought she would become Queen of Scotland by erecting a huge thermometer on top of Arthur's seat. that would count the progress towards independence. Sadly, her idea never came to fruition because she didn't become queen. But what a sight it would have been, falling every day. She was instead beaten by the most foolish man in the land. The court jester became king. An imbecile king called Humza Yousaf. Is calling Humza Yousaf an imbecile a hate crime? Yes, to imbeciles. So arrest us now. Hashtag. Anyway, Ash Regan left the SNP and went to Alba to join the king over the water. Alex Salmond, there she aimed to regain her dignity and stand with the Groper King himself. You guessed it, for women's rights. Anyway, this week, Ash decided to launch a petition to repeal the hate crime bill, saying she was duped by King Humza into voting for it in the first place. She said, as a junior minister in 2021, I voted for a bill that promised a pathway to additional protections to make our open and welcoming Scotland safe for all. Well, that's very poetic. But the reality, 3 years on, is that Scotland, our police and parliament have been embarrassed, left to traverse a self-destructive pathway. The root cause of this and other legislative failures is the erosion of good governance to safeguard the legislative processes. Well, that's probably quite true. I must now side with those who call for repeal. The chilling effect has begun, and the original vision of the bill is lost. Okay, maybe a bit late. Anyway, so the big idea is to launch a petition. Like, that will really work. Perhaps a thermometer counting all the non-crime hate incidents would be better. Anyway, just to recap my rant from last week, you're no hero if you still support the nationalism that caused this disaster in the first place. When will these nutters ever understand that nationalism is inherently authoritarian and they're the cause of their own demise? I have to laugh when they say our nationalism is better than everyone else's, until it isn't. So our message to Ash is, have you noticed that it's authoritarian nationalists that want authoritarian laws? Maybe, just maybe, there's a connection. So for total lack of self-awareness, my vote goes to Ash Regan.
Very good.
Okay, good. Definitely Zoomerish.
Well, yeah.
Really?
We know what Ash is. She feels wronged. She's felt this ever since she voted against the GRR bill. In fairness, she did vote against that one. But she's obviously now regretting the fact that she voted for this idiotic hate crimes bill, probably because she's spending all her time talking to Salmond and his mob, who realised themselves it was a pile of absolute nonsense. So it's very difficult to take her seriously. She's obviously just positioning to get Alba more prominence. So I don't really take anything.
I mean, we're not going to get anywhere, are they?
No, Alba not at all. This year, not.
Nobody's interested.
Nobody is interested. Next Zoomer is going to be Mairi Zoomer.
Really? It's usually David.
I'll do this.
Yeah,
it must be the way the pages are done. Okay, next one is David. So David, you'll be up in a second.
My nomination for Zoomer of the Week is Net Zero and Transport Secretary Mairi MacAllan. We Mairi, no stranger to this nomination from me. Mairi has had yet another week in which she has performed abysmally. It began in Holyrood last Thursday with a delayed emergency question after the Chief Executive Ferguson's in Port Glasgow lost his job. And when she was asked, she said, I was only told on Monday, and I don't haven't really got any information to give you, sorry. But I'll tell you what, the Ferguson's board will update me and they'll also update you. So cheers, guys. Nothing to do with me, any of this. Wow, that's how to earn your corn, Mairi. Well done. Now, meanwhile, while this is all going on, Mairi will presumably continue to look pretty and use lengthy words to make herself look really
Could be hate crime in there.
Exactly. Sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry, but you're allowed to insult women.
Thank you. I was actually being...
and that's okay in Scotland. Misogyny is okay in Scotland. It's just a few.
Yeah, that's true at the moment. Yeah, because the bill isn't there yet. If she'd been trans, I wouldn't be allowed to say a thing. Anyway.
No, God, no.
Goodness. Moving on to this, that's assuming she's not. I don't mean to misgender you, man. I'm so sorry. Anyway, this is what it's getting you to. You can't say two words. Anyway, moving on to this week, Mairi turned her attention to income tax. She took offence to somebody saying something on BBC Radio.
Like a monkey on Mastermind.
Honestly, what a girl. But she took the opportunity to repeat the SNP claim that most people in Scotland pay less income tax than those on similar salaries.
Sorry, I didn't get that tweet, but yes, okay.
Yeah, all right, no worries. It's okay, cool. So she said this, and which is true if you're claiming, Mairi, that under the SNP, most Scots earn less than £27,000 per annum, which is the threshold above which all Scots pay more income tax than their counterparts in the rest of the UK. And those Scots earning between, I think, 42 and 50 really get hammered. They pay an awful lot more. Anyway, as Twitter context, these little additions you can put onto tweets these days, as somebody pointed out, the median salary in Scotland, that's the salary,
Yes, I've got the thing
salary, is £30,000, which renders Mairi's claim demonstrably untrue, because if you earn 30,000, you pay more tax than elsewhere in the UK. But luckily for Mairi, she was spared further embarrassment today because the chief exec of Caledonian McBrain has now stepped down or been given the push.
Right.
Shipping has certainly become a precarious occupation under the SSP, hasn't it, guys? My goodness. But luckily for Mairi, Holyrood's closed for Easter, so she has a few days until she can come back and say, so what happened with the Caledonian guy? No idea, I don't know. It must have been the board. I'll tell you what, the board will tell you soon. Don't worry, I'm just going to sit down now.
Always the last to know.
Exactly. Like the song says, exactly, Delamitri. So for her continued failure, even to be bothered going through the motions of doing her job, Mairi, you get the nomination again.
I thought you were going to show a video or something.
Oh, no, it wasn't this a vid. No, it wasn't. It was just a tweet. It was just a tweet.
Oh, right. Okay.
Actually, there was a video. Hang on, see if I find it while we're talking. There was one.
I've got the video here. I've got the video here.
You got it?
This one.
This is one. Go for that.
The contract termination to take place in the week commencing 25th of March.
Edward Monkton.
This is the one.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Tomorrow, I assume the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee will get an update from the Yard on what's happening. Now, I'm going to ask the Cabinet Secretary in advance of that. What is the actual delay to 801 and what are the actual extra costs? And what are the delays to 802 and the extra costs there? You must know because you said they're unacceptable. Could you tell us?
Cabinet Secretary, with regard to the substantive question.
Yes, absolutely, Presiding Officer, thank you. I gave a statement to Parliament in respect of the most recently formally confirmed costs and expected completion dates. I do not have sufficient information in order to update Parliament with the specificity that I would want to bring to the Chamber. I was formally notified on Monday of potential delays crystallising, but the new executive team and the board will now interrogate those. They will update me and they will update Parliament in the normal way.
So there you go. The board will
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There should have been a full ministerial statement on this matter.
Yep.
The Scottish Government are ultimately responsible for this fiasco, yet not one of the countless ministers on the ministerial merry-go-round has taken responsibility. The GMB have made mentions...
that was the one. Yeah, I mean, just...
Exactly that. Sorry, I forgot I sent you the video.
It's really like a monkey, as I said, like a monkey standing up in Mastermind or something.
Absolutely.
It's so pathetic to watch.
This is the minister in charge of a nationalised company, whose board has just fired the CEO. So what was this all about? And what was the police? I don't know. Why did you ask me? I don't know.
Don't ask me.
And, we need to work out how much the ministerial salary is divided by the number of days they work to see what their daily rate is and maybe even their minute rate, and then we can see how much she was paid for that nonsense there. Anyway, Mairi, you are going... Yeah,
did she just say specificity? She did. She also did crystallising as well. She didn't want to... I don't know the specifics.
Eating a dictionary before she started would help she ate some common sense. Oh, okay.
I know. I think it's like that episode of what is it? Is it Seinfeld or someone? The thesaurus. I can't remember. Some kind of show anyway. When the person just has looked up the thesaurus for every single word.
Right, okay.
It reminds me of the guy in the Fast Show, the croupier in the Fast Show. He was playing roulette, whatever, and the guys were going to say, "What are the odds against it becoming zero?" And he would go, "I don't know."
Right.
He never knew any answers, and that's what she's like. It's just pathetic, honestly. Anyway.
Right, Mairi, you're up. See if you can beat that. Have you got the people with you this time?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, who's judging?
I'm judging.
Oh,
so guess who wins?
What hope do we have?
Okay. So my Zoomer of the week is another lady, actually, another woman, Lesely Riddoch. For her ridiculously amusing article in The National with the advice to Humza Yousaf on his first anniversary as First Minister. She has advised him, no more Mr. Nice Guy, Humza. Let's hear you roar. I mean, how ridiculous. She starts, it's Humza Yousaf's first year as First Minister. The general ranking has been 6 or 7 marks out of 10. Like, my arse it has. I mean, really? He's being laughed at around the world. Scotland is a joke. And even like his biggest supporter can only give him 6 or 7 in the national. I mean, if you only get 6 or 7 in the national from Mrs. Nationalist herself, then I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then she says, she goes on to say, one nippy comment in the national described Yousaf as the archetypal nice guy. Who has ever called Humza Yousaf the archetypal nice guy? Well, maybe in the national, but the rest of the world knows him as absolutely useless. And Leslie says, oh, it's a sore fact when apparent honesty and integrity are negative qualities. It's like, did she just say honesty and integrity? I mean, really? Wait to hear this. She says, most folk will acknowledge that Yousaf is a natural conciliator whose strong and early call for a ceasefire in Gaza also acknowledged the suffering in Israel. Sorry, guys, did we miss that bit about the suffering in Israel when he was talking? I think, Mark, you looked it up, didn't you? And you couldn't find...
he'd only mentioned the hostages once or something, and that was like in November.
And through gritted teeth.
I don't even know if he still mentioned them. You can do a Twitter search.
I mean, she's coming out with all this rubbish. And she said, it would have been easy to be angry, righteous, or retreat completely from public life. Yousaf struck none of these pointless poses and won respect from almost every quarter. It's like, what world does she live in? It's like respect and Yousaf should never be used in the same sentence.
It's a real new clothes thing, isn't it?
I mean, they shouldn't be in the same sentence unless demonstrating an oxymoron, and moron being the operative word there. Yousaf and respect. She said, and then she goes on about basically when, you remember last June when he bounded off the podium during that televised keynote speech in Dundee, because there was a woman protesting about the disgraced neurosurgeon.
That's right.
She says, such a high-risk strategy. It's like, in front of the world's TV. She said it was unprecedented and unrehearsed. It spoke of a man practiced in dispute resolution, confident about his own skills of mediation. It absolutely did not. It spoke of someone unable to stay in control of an event and someone untrained, unpredictable, and taking unnecessary risks. I mean, you just think that he doesn't know what he's doing, jumping off the stage to go and, after confront this woman.
Oh, that one. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then she goes on about
a hug. You're like, the woman's like, oh, leave me alone.
It's ridiculous. So then she goes on about how basically those same skills are what was used to persuade the health unions to accept to pay deals in 2022 and junior doctors to settle. Oh. She said Scotland is the only country in the UK not impacted by NHS strikes, a considerable achievement.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, he handed out pay rises that Scotland couldn't afford.
Right.
And now it's being funded by huge cuts to public services.
Well, that's right. The black hole.
I mean, that's not crafty negotiation. That's giving in and weak leadership.
Right, yes.
But at the very end, she did concede that conciliation was totally missing when Yousaf imposed a council tax freeze. Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. So basically, Humza Yousaf isn't... I would like to say to Leslie Riddoch that Humza Yousaf is not capable of a roar, more like a constipated squeak. And for all these reasons, Leslie Riddoch is my Zoomer of the week.
Come on, Mary, it's too good. You're too good.
It's too good, actually. Yeah.
I'm trying to win these.
I'm good at these.
I'm trying to win these.
Right. Okay. So, this week it's me who decides. I can't write the thing in at the same time as actually deciding.
Right, well, you can decide.
Right. So who have we got? Okay. So we've got Mark with Ash Regan.
I thought it was good, but I have to say the public weren't for it.
Oh, you don't think so?
No.
Oh, okay, okay. But I like the way you delivered it.
I know it was well delivered, but anyway.
Yeah, your little fairy tale there that was going on.
David's got you and David, I think.
Mairi MacAllan. Mm-hmm. I've got Leslie Riddoch.
For Zoomerism, I think. Well, anyway, you didn't decide.
I don't know, guys. What do you think?
I'm happy to go with you, Mary. Leslie's the ultimate Zoomer as far as I'm concerned.
I don't really like voting for myself, though. Should I? Should I not?
Go for it. Seriously, it's fine. Go for it.
Right. Let's go for Leslie Riddoch because I mean, about Humza Yousaf, and it's absolute Zoomerism. It really is.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you. So I have to put it in. Hold on, Leslie Riddoch.
Right.
Sorry, guys,
okay,
but you'll just have to do better next week.
Yeah. We can make attempts.
No,
here.
I can see that. I can see
we're working,
definitely points for effort.
We're
absolutely.
working hard.
Oh, I've got a tactical vote from James Jameson. Well done, fantastic.
Yay. Maybe we could all be winners right now.
Yes. Well, we can be heroes just for one day, and this is, and maybe that day is today. or maybe that day is at the next general election when we vote these people out of office. Remember that, heroes. Okay, anyway, thank you very much for being with us on our show. Every week, Scotland's #1 politics chat. The thought for the week is, this is something I saw on Twitter, actually, and they say they want freedom, but you can't want freedom for Scotland when you want to enslave your fellow Scots.
Yeah.
This is the basic point here. It's freedom for them, but not for freedom for thee, but not for me, or whatever it is. Anyway, thank you very much for your support, and we've had a great show, and we're glad that you have enjoyed it. Also, judging by the comments, thank you very much. It's really great. I go through the show. If you don't know, I go through the show afterwards and read all the comments out and check everyone. So, thank you all for participating, and we will see you again next week at the same time, 7 p.m. every Wednesday.
And thank you for all the comments tonight. Thank you. There's been so many of them. Good night, everyone.
Great stuff, guys. Thanks, everybody. See you all soon. Cheers.
All right, take care.